Hi, everyone. Welcome to Turning Point. I'm your host, Blaine Birch. And joining me today, I'm super excited to have Guy Bauer from Umault, a video production company in Chicago. And Guy actually happens to be another one of our customers, which we don't feature all the time, but we're really excited to have him here. Been able to talk with Guy off and on for, here and there over the years. And really excited to actually take the time and talk a little bit more about your background and take a little time to dive into how you became an entrepreneur, Guy. Thanks for joining the show.
Yeah, great to be here, Blaine. Thanks for having me.
So just to, I guess, go back a little bit, what was your first sort of, I guess, starting point of wanting to be an entrepreneur, or when did it sort of hit you that there was something interesting here?
I've actually always wanted to be an entrepreneur. I just never have had the guts to do it. I never had the guts to quit my job or do anything bold. I was forced into entrepreneurship due to the Great Recession. So in 2009, basically like Thanksgiving 2009, got laid off and sent out a ton of resumes and didn't even get one interview. It was a disaster back in 2009. And so in January 1st, I was at a Barnes and Noble, and there was a money magazine with the headline "How to Make Money in 2010." And I was like, yeah, I need that. And I read an article, and they're like, hey, in between unemployment payments to subsidize yourself, you could, if you have a hobby, do one of these freelancing websites. And back then the freelancing sites were guru.com and elance.com, and Elance has turned into Upwork. And so I started my entrepreneurial journey with a $50 gig on guru.com to edit this guy's puppy videos. And
Nice.
He sent me $50 and put a nice review in, and there I went. And that was it.
So do you still have the puppy video? I'm just curious.
What's funny is I don't have it. I don't know what happened to it, but I don't know. I don't have it.
Yeah.
So
A friend of mine was telling me about the Wayback Machine. I'm pretty sure it's called the Wayback Machine, where you can look at websites, like basically any website ever. And I actually looked back at a couple of the websites, like my very first one, like 1996 or whatever. And it was kind of neat to see, but also just like a little uncomfortable. It's like, oh, that's so bad, right?
Oh,
But,
I have some of my early videos, and they're, terrible.
I think I probably still have a couple of CD-ROMs around from back in the days when we were doing CD-ROM work, but there's zero chance I can ever do anything with them because I'll never get them. Who has a CD-ROM player? And then the software probably won't run anymore anyway.
Yeah.
And so it's just all this stuff that was precious at one point. It's all up in smoke
Crazy?
now. Yeah. Interesting that, a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of times it's opportunity, but you're shoved into it. But obviously you've taken to it because there's only, honestly, only, I think about half the people make it to year 5. Only, it's like 25% are done in their first year. You obviously took a shining to it and are good at it and enjoy it, and you've grown this really great business. So, I guess before we get into that, what was number 2 after puppy video?
Oh, well, and actually that kind of starts my my hard learnings of entrepreneurship. So I'm pretty sure video number 2 was another gig off of guru.com. And I think it was $300 to shoot and edit this credit card relief company. And this is like a microcosm of what was wrong with the way I ran this business, where I didn't take cash into account and didn't have any accounting, rules at all. The project was $300, and in order to do the project, I had to buy a $250 microphone and like a $100 something or other accessory. So the project lost me money, but that's just kind of how I was just going. I was making myself really busy, and the kind of cash flow differential of money in and money out never really caught up with each other, and I was able to
Yeah.
cover up a ton of bad mistakes running the business by just doing lots of work. So there definitely was demand. I mean, I started in 2010, and yeah, I'm pretty sure the first year I started, gross revenue was $30,000. 2011 was 200,000. 2012 was 500,000. Like it just kept kind of doubling, and that I used to think in terms of top line, right? So that's how I used to brag about the company. And it also reinforced bad habits of like, well, if you just keep going and growing and just, just outgrow all your problems. And that all came to a grinding halt in 2018, where basically we became a $3.2 million company, top line. We got into Inc. 5000, at number 800. So it was like, wow, you're so successful. That very same year, I lost $1 million. So it took me like 8 years to play that game of it working, where I was able to cover up a ton of bad business moves by just making myself and the company really busy and just getting that top line in. But the second that spigot stops, it's kind of like the Warren Buffett quote, is that you see when the tide goes out, who's been skinny dipping. And for sure, I was buck naked under there.
Yeah. And, that's, boy, we hear that a lot. And I'm guilty, like, especially early in my career. I did exactly the same thing. Like my first studio, I'm like, well, this won't make enough money that I can, maybe I can buy some legal software, like instead of the stuff I got out of the back alley or whatever. Maybe I can upgrade, get a laptop or, but I've talked with business owners that are, room full of staff, like you said, like they're north of $1 million. And they're kind of doing the same thing. Like the money comes in and it's like, well, now we can buy this, build this, expand this. And you never get to the end, right? You never get to a win. You're just always trying to bring in enough revenue to just kind of keep the boat afloat. And it's a tough one.
Yeah. I mean, and it's not just a small business. I mean, I was looking at this article and it was listing all these startups and big businesses that have only lost money. Like Uber has never made money. Like all these companies that we look up to, that are like big companies, they're playing the same thing, and it's all on a hope that one day you'll be able to fix it. But I don't know if that day ever comes, and it definitely doesn't come when you don't have shareholders and a bunch of capital behind you. If you're just a bootstrap person, you're in for a world of hurt playing that game because there's no one coming to save you.
Yeah. And you know what, like you pointed out, like, cause I'm in the I'm in the startup world, tech startup land and all that. And, for like years, we were just pressured to grow. Like, it was, the idea is to raise a pile of money and then grow stupidly fast. The blitz scale, they used to call it blitz scale. And, we were just more conservative than that, I guess. And we, kind of like, a lot of businesses they get, it's like a meat grinder. Like 10 go in and 1 comes out. Like, and we're kind of like, I'm too attached to this. We're not going to go into that meat grinder, right? But that's the philosophy, and there's always this pressure and push. And then just a couple of years ago, suddenly, literally overnight, it flipped. Mm-hmm. Like literally, and honestly, we were close to closing around. We were just like at this point, I look and go, it's probably a good thing that we didn't. Like this is probably the best thing for us. And I've probably talked about this on the show before, but they coined this term that the startup community coined a term, the investors, not the community, default alive. They said, move from blitz scale to default alive. And I'm like, you assholes, that's just profit. That's just break even. Like you're making up a bloody word for something we've had for 10,000 years because you feel bad that you've just decided to suddenly flip. But what you said that I hadn't really thought about is it's the same thing in the established business world, that all these fastest growing company lists are all top line. And I never really thought about it till you said that. I'm like, yeah, you're right. That's how they do it. It's all top line.
It's
hope for the best.
yeah. And yeah, I mean, the same year I get in that thing and everyone's congratulating me, little do they all know that I never even have seen $1 million, and then I lost it. I mean, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, there's this at the back end of the Steve Jobs biography by Walter Isaacson. He let Steve Jobs write the last chapter, or like the epilogue or whatever. And Steve Jobs writes, go to your library. Just I literally like just took pictures of the last chapter. It's amazing. But in the chapter he goes, everybody's looking to start a business, scale it, sell it, go public. And he's like, how about just having a business? How about just being okay with just taking quarterly profit distributions from that business? How about just like having a long, sustainable, like profitable, like you don't need to rule the world. The object of every business isn't to become Amazon or Google. And I feel, especially this is probably a North American culture thing, but it's like we feel like if you're not a billionaire, you are a gigantic loser.
Yeah.
And I don't think that that's right at all. I mean, well, I used to think that. That's why I scaled and scale growth. I mean, if you look at every credit card commercial for businesses, it's like, so you can grow your business. Growing your business with credit cards is like the dumbest thing you could possibly do.
Yeah, exactly.
What are you doing? And that's who they prey on. They prey on just like a bunch of people who have never been spanked by the business gods.
Yeah.
And that have to learn that lesson. But yeah, I used to want to be a billionaire. Now, you know what I want? I just want freedom. I just want I want to be able to sleep at night. I want to do my job. I want to get paid for the risk that I take in owning this business. Yeah. But other than that, I don't need to be Bezos. I really don't. Yeah. And I think that's probably, you get a yacht, but you also are on TV being made fun of every day and criticized about every little thing. They criticize him for working out. They criticize him for not working. I mean, that's hell. It stinks.
Yeah. And no time. Like that. That's the sense I get is like, it's like these guys, they do the 80, 90-hour work weeks. And it's like, well, when are you going to enjoy life? Like, do you actually get on your yacht at all? I don't even want a yacht. Like, I don't know that big on boats, really, to be honest.
And like, to each their own, right? That may be your motivating factor to be a billionaire and go public and all that stuff. But for me, I mean, after 13 years of doing this, is to me the dream of entrepreneurship is to like guide your own destiny as best you can and reap the rewards of of the risk that you've taken. And to me, that's just through quarterly distributions and the salary.
Yeah, exactly. And it's hard to get here. And I think the like the public and the culture says over and over again, like you said, like you should be a billionaire. You should be like every business on the planet, I think. And there's something like, it depends where you see the list of the numbers, and so our solopreneurs businesses now, but it's still like 90 million, something like that. If you count all of that. So people that are still entrepreneurial, that are trying to do something, and 90 million of them are basically compared to like a half a dozen, Amazon, Facebook,
right,
Tesla, whatever, and Apple or whatever. And it's absolutely ridiculous. And when you look at the numbers, that there's this idea that business owners, I'm sure you've seen it. The culture now is saying that business owners are all rich and entitled.
Yeah.
And I know from the other side, because we talk with business owners all the time, oftentimes they're the lowest paid on the totem pole. There's a lot of times they don't take payments. They have big bank loans. They have a lot of risk tied up. They're employing people, and it's like see the staff members like, oh, that guy was really grumpy, and it's like, yeah, he probably hasn't slept in 4 days, right? Yeah. Like that's the reality. They're not saying anything, but that could be the reality, or maybe it's just an asshole. Like you get those two, but there's something broken when it is so hard to be an entrepreneur. Like I said, only half will make it to year 5. I think by year 10, I can't even remember the numbers, are like, it's infinitesimal of actually who survives that long. entrepreneurs are taking a really big risk, and it's hard, and we're not looking for sympathy, but should also not be trampled and should not be held to a standard that is ridiculous. I don't see someone jogging down the street and say to them, well, you're not, I guess we're up in Canada here. It's like, well, you're not Connor McDavid. Then why are you even doing that?
Right.
Unless you're the best in the world, it's a waste of time, right? It doesn't make sense.
No. No. And yeah, you're right. And one of the things that got me in trouble too was all the business books are written by people from big companies or people that, want to start big companies or whatever. Mm-hmm. And so there's a lot of just bad advice, because most companies will not become that big. But what's funny is like, if you were to say, Guy, would you like $50,000 right now? I'd be like, yes. And in the grand scheme of things, Bloomberg is not going to report on that. Like, today, Guy took a $50,000 distribute. That's nothing. That's like someone's travel budget for like a week. That's nothing. But to me, that's a lot. That should be wait, you telling me on top of my salary, you're going to now give me like tens of thousands just because I did my thing? Great. Yeah. Like, just everyone needs to get back to like reality, and having a business that pays you hundreds of thousands of dollars that you get to control, and I get to say what's on our website. I get to control our brand. I have 100% control over it. That feels great. I love that. So I get to control it and I get money. Yeah. That's great. Like, why do I know? Like, this is the perfect reward for the risk I took. And I think it's that whole idea of like contentment and all that stuff. And we have a big problem in Western culture of just being cool with, what you do. That's the big lesson I learned, honestly, in 13 years is sustainability is way better than scalability in my mind.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I 100% agree. And I think a lot of business owners, they at their heart, they agree that there's so many, it's so hard as it is. There's so many challenges that it is, every day with everything that, you don't have to have this massive pressure and runway and everything that is so difficult and so painful. And I don't know. And you know what? I wouldn't do anything else. Like, that's the thing. That's the other thing. I would never do anything else. Like, I don't know. Like, would I want this massive business right now? Because would I be talking with you? If this was like a $1 billion business or whatever, would I be talking with other entrepreneurs and with customers and that, and actually, cause that's part of what gives fulfillment, is when our team gets to talk with customers and potential customers and see, just learn about that. It feels like you'd be up in that sort of almost ivory tower type thing and be completely disassociated. And maybe I'm completely off the mark, but it just feels like here's another spreadsheet.
Yeah. Well, I think there's, and that's the thing, that's the flavor of entrepreneurship that you like. And I mean, that's the thing, is there's like a spectrum. But we're kind of taught and we're shown that there's only one way of business, and that's to be, private equity, or let's get a shareholders meetings and wheeling in cap tables. And like, we're taught that that's the only way to do it. And if you're not doing it that way, you're a loser. But yeah, the greatest thing about business is it's up to you. And what I love about it is you get feedback of like, nope, market doesn't like that. Market likes that. I mean, that's my favorite part of the entrepreneurship thing, is the trial and error and just the constant, like, I love learning stuff, and I love like having theories and then testing the theories. I've always had jobs where I had crazy ideas and they'd be like, you're crazy, shut up. And they would never do my ideas because they were nuts. But in entrepreneurship, you can actually do those nutty ideas, and most of them do suck. They're terrible. But you get instant feedback. Oh boy, yeah, that was bad. But some of them, 1 out of every 30, you know, it sprouts like a weed. It works. And you're like, oh my gosh, eureka. It's such a rewarding thing when like a theory that you had in the shower one day and then you put it and launch it and it works. And like someone on the other end is like, I have money for you for that thing you thought of.
Yeah.
Like, that's amazing. Oh my gosh. There's like, to me, that's the heart of all this thing, is seeing the market respond to something that you did. That's just, I love it.
Yeah. And that's the fun part. That's the rewarding part. And I know we've talked about this before. Like it's the finances and that is, you want to be able to not have to think about that, so you can focus on the fun stuff and the interesting stuff and the stuff that's innovative and moves you forward. But like you said, like the culture also doesn't teach entrepreneurs, like, because entrepreneurs generally don't go to business school. That's like, it's rare. They just kind of skip that whole thing, right? They become a domain expert and they're dumped into this area. Mm-hmm. And, you know, like being part of a startup, when I look at all of our sort of advisors and investors, and you basically throw a rock and you're going to hit a group, you know, it's a group of, you know, that are going to advise startups, right? Mm-hmm. And they're everywhere. And they all talk about how you raise money, but they never even talk about the fundamentals of finance. It's just kind of raise money and then spend it all. And hope you don't die. And it's I agree with you. Like, how many of the business books are either, here's how you run Ford, you know, or something like that, or here's how you build Amazon. And there's very little that is just, no, this is like cash in, cash out. Like, this is what you have to be able to do. Basic stuff, but you have to learn it the hard way, it seems.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's like two sides of that spectrum. So there's one where it's like Good to Great. I love Good to Great. It's a great book, but he's talking about Herman Mockler from Gillette and the guys from Bethlehem Steel. I forget, but like, so there's that where like you're learning from public companies. Again, that has nothing to do with me. Or there's E-Myth, where it's about a pie shop and like fungible products and stuff. So I feel like all the entrepreneur stuff, or a lot of it, is either, do you want to be a big public company, or are you selling like candles or some kind of like very fungible thing that has low skill and low labor needed to do it. So you can just and that's where E-Myth, you know, well, I'm working on my business, not in it. And I mean, it sounds great, but I got into so much trouble following E-Myth. Because my line of business is all about creativity. So that is not an unskilled job. That's a crazy skilled job. That's like, you know, so all the business books to me are like, most of them don't apply to any particular one person's business. It's kind of like buyer beware. And that was my business education. I've read those two books. I've read a bunch of different books, but most of them I would say got me into deep trouble. And nobody, Robert Kiyosaki does have I forget his book is all about cash flow. Yeah. But it's not technical. His thing is about like, it's a little bit higher level. But there's, you know, the one book is Profit First came out. Yeah. And that was like, oh my gosh. And he gave you a big dose. And I think in that book too, Mike Michalowicz talks about that whole working in your business, or work on your business, not in it. And he was like, nah, that's kind of BS. You kind of have to work in your business. Like, get off your high horse, get out there and push. And that is true. For most SMBs, you need to work. You're not some, you know, guru. Yeah. You know, like, maybe you will become that. But while you're building it, like, you have to work. What are you doing? You can't take weeks off and, you know, just stay at Starbucks. You have to work. Period. You don't have that much cash. Yeah. I still can't believe how many years I went without like a vacation early on, because you're just like, someone's got to do it. And it's me, right? Like, it's what it is. And fortunately now I'm able to do that, like take some of that time and stuff. And I don't even know if I've got one here, but like, cause I wrote a book a number of years ago because,
that's what I found online was there was nothing just simple and practical.
Yeah.
So I wrote a book, and it's not like a Pulitzer Prize winner, but it's all on cash flow. But it's just like, I remember I was getting so frustrated because I would look at articles online on cash flow, and you'd search for cash flow for business, and it'll be like a million lists would come up, and they would all basically say, yeah, it's important.
Yeah.
Get a spreadsheet.
Yeah.
And they don't even tell you how to use a spreadsheet.
Yeah.
Nothing. It's
Yep.
just like, oh yeah, well, you should know this or you're going to die. But
Yep.
there's no, so I wrote this book and like, okay, make it super. And then unfortunately I called it Pandemic Cash Flow. And then the pandemic came out and kind of ruined the title. So I'm still thinking I should actually rename it at some point. But it was just, it's just, it was my just annoyance of there's people out there that just don't understand what I had to learn the hard way of, if you're not planning and you're not watching and suddenly a big check's going to clear and you're not ready for it or whatever, and you're screwed, right? Mm-hmm. I think there needs to be a little bit more of that really pragmatic, just help you get a business going, even if you're not trying to be the next like Elon Musk, right?
Yeah. And I think a lot of it too is that, you can write all these books you want, but until you do it, until you feel it,
yep.
And that's why I used to be like a very, I used to read a ton all the time. But as I get older, I'm like, you know what? Like, yeah, I don't know. I could waste time reading it or just dive in and just do it and figure it out and like put controls around experiments so that you don't like go too far. You don't bet too big. Yeah. I still read, but it's not like I used to read I wanted someone to do it for me. I wanted to come up. I was reading to find the perfect framework. Like, what is the framework how can I get a framework to get $1 billion? And the answer is there is no framework, because if there was, why would they share it with anyone? And everyone who read that book would just be a billionaire. I mean, it makes no sense. Like, and that's the biggest thing is I used to always read for the formula, and then I'd follow every book. And that was another root of evil or root of disaster is I would read a book and then change my entire company, and then read another book that would contradict that other book and undo everything and just drive my people absolutely insane doing this. So now when I read knowing that, this is not a formula for success. This is not meant to be followed. Yeah. If you could pick a couple things out of it that you can maybe try or whatever, fine. But no one has it figured out. Nobody, because a business is like a fingerprint. Like it is completely unique to that business. How could there be a Pepsi and a Coke? They sell the same two things, but they are like, it's two unique fingerprints. Yeah. And that's why they have different success and different ways of being. So no one has written the book for your business because your business has never existed. You have to write your own book. That's what I love. As I get older, that's actually what I love is the experimentation and the figuring out and the journey of figuring out what works for Umault.
Yeah. Yeah. And I read a lot of books. I'll tell you, they're all novels now.
Yeah, fiction.
And the reason is because I've learned over the years, I don't need to be filling my head with more stuff at night, because it's like a runaway train. It never stops. It's the opposite. I have to slow my brain down at night and not think about business. Get on the weekend and actually have a weekend. And, for us, we hop on our bikes and we go for brunch and we pass by a bunch of breweries.
Yeah.
We ride home. But it's amazing how many business problems are solved when I'm doing that. And that's because you're relaxed and you're away from it. And all of a sudden your subconscious is working in the background. All of a sudden, bing, oh shit, there's an answer. That's amazing. I think that's that work-life balance thing that people talk about here and there. It's like, it's more important than people think. You have to have that to be successful. These guys that say you got to work 80 hours a week or you're a useless human being, I'm like, I get lost. No.
You know what I think it is like, I think you're right. What you need is more than anything is sustainability. So like if you work 7 days a week for a year, you will go insane. And
Yep.
you will start making the quality of your decisions, believe me, because that's what I did, your quality of your decisions will erode
Yeah.
precipitously. So what you're talking about is, a sustainable model of like, the brain needs to rest, or else how, none of us are machines, and yeah, and we all need sleep and rest, and that's the thing. And I think, but there are seasons of busyness where you, as the entrepreneur, do need to sometimes work 7
Oh,
days
yeah.
a week,
It happens.
and
Absolutely.
don't be all precious when that has to happen. I think
Yeah.
the entrepreneur, if anything, you have to be extremely mentally elastic. You have to
Hmm.
be able to put things into perspective. You have to be able to understand the idea of trading off things. You have to just have raw power to and raw stamina to just do this day in and out.
Yeah.
But yeah, some days, like, you're exactly right. You need to sustain the engine and
Yeah.
then just rise and fall to the occasion or whatever when the business asks for it.
And I think a lot of times entrepreneurs, well, at least I know with me and a lot of entrepreneurs I've run into, the problem is trying to dial it back. That is what has taken discipline to learn and to be able to try and shut down at the end of the day to some degree and take some time, take the odd vacation, because you need that. And my nature is to just freaking drive, go, go, go. I can't stop. I can't stop pushing. And my brain is like, you go to bed and it's like every once in a while I get into those times where it's hard to sleep and that.
Yeah.
And then I get so frustrated when I read an article on someone giving sleep advice. We need a dark, quiet room. You know what dark, quiet room does? It's like a freaking chainsaw. Like, no, I need something to distract me, because if it's dark and it's quiet, my brain will run it's overheat, right? And but I think everyone has to find their place where they can balance it out and see where their weaknesses are. And, all this stuff, like I think back even with Dryrun, and we're always doing things. We're always testing, we're moving, we're changing, adjusting, looking for opportunity. And when you hit something and it's working, it always looks so easy in hindsight.
Yeah.
Like so obvious, right? But at the time, you're looking at 10 different options and they all seem reasonable, and people have advised you and they all seem reasonable. But exactly what you said, the fingerprint of your business is they're not all going to work. And how do you test, and then suddenly it's like, oh, that seems obvious now. Yeah, but there were a bunch of others that looked like a good idea at the time too, and they weren't,
Have you ever seen Alone? It's like a game show where they send people out to survive by themselves.
Oh yeah, I've seen like maybe an episode or two. Yeah.
Oh yeah. To me, business is just like Alone. It's You're out there. The main things in Alone you have to do when you're surviving, you have to build shelter, and you have to find a reliable source for food. And it's never one reliable. The winners always have a multi-channel approach to where they get their food. It could be fishing, it could be hunting, and it's all about resource management, because they only get a certain amount of daylight hours in the day to find food and stuff. And so the winners always do a great job of what entrepreneurs do, which is cash allocation or resource management. The winners in Alone always manage their resources exactly right. If a channel isn't working, they'll cut it off. They aren't afraid of quitting. That's another thing I had to learn how to do being an entrepreneur, is like, it's okay to quit sometimes. If something isn't working, don't go into sunk cost bias. Like, cut the thing. Just cut it off.
Yep.
And just live to see another day. It's the same thing as poker players. Fold what could be a great hand. They fold it if it's not premium. And that's the hardest thing, or I would say one of the most important things is like resource management. Warren Buffett always says his number one talent is just cash allocation. He just knows how to do it.
Yeah. It's no, that's as you're talking about that, it got my brain thinking even internally about that, and it's just a really, I guess, clean way to describe that. And the, success is, it's so hard for entrepreneur. Like it's such a hard place to be, but, I almost wish I would have taken notes. Good thing we're recording this. I'm actually going to watch that whole part after, but it's just really interesting. You actually got distracted listening to you, like I'm watching a show or something. Like, this is great. Take some notes. It's, we were talking about the, this is the totally sidetrack. We were talking about the alone. And when I was in, maybe junior high, like about 13 or 14, I took like a survival course, and I remember being dumped out in the bush with a couple of friends, and it was winter, so there was snow on the ground, and we had like a little canister with like some matches and a little piece of wire and a sleeping bag, and I think that was basically all we had. And I remember how desperate we were to catch a squirrel because we were so hungry. We would have eaten a squirrel. And of course, we never did, and there was no place to fish. I don't know what else we would have eaten. Unfortunately, it was like 24 hours or whatever, and all he had was basically water. And I still remember just trying to get a squirrel, and I'm thinking like, that is just disgusting, but that's how hungry we were. We would have eaten a squirrel if we would have got him.
And sometimes business is so maddening that it does feel that hard to like book a new client or, get a deal or whatever. You feel like, oh my gosh, like I'm hunting for squirrels here and nothing is coming. Entrepreneur. Because the other thing is like there's seasons. There's seasons where everything is lush and the plants are growing berries and there's tons of animals. You can kill whatever you want. And then there are barren seasons. And oh my gosh, like last year, the last 6 months of last year was a barren city for us. I mean, like we couldn't close anything. Yeah. But I think this is the skill of a good entrepreneur is it's not having rose-colored glasses. It's not being like stupid or ignorant. It's being like optimistic but realistic at the same time. Like, all right, we are in kind of a mess right now. What are the 10 steps we're going to do to get ourselves out of it? I'm optimistic that if we do these 10 things, we can pull out. But a lot of folks, I think, the entrepreneurs that don't make it, what they do is they either refuse to pivot and they just do the same thing they've always done, or they actually kind of collapse. And the danger just, because it is dangerous. I mean, oh my gosh, making payroll payments into no sales, like at the same time you're paying people salary, you are not selling anything. That takes like, what? That's insane to a lot of folks. And it's like, at what point is that line for you?
And it's painful. It's so painful.
Oh yeah. Come on now.
It's and like I think you've said this before, and I've heard it from others too. Is like, in fact, I think it was the founder of Bonobos. I was listening to some podcasts recently. I think he was the guy that said it's just the businesses that failed. It was the entrepreneur just didn't hang in long enough.
Yeah.
Like from his perspective, it was like everything else is fixable. You just have to hang in. You have to hang in long enough. And that's part of it, is just survival instincts and hanging in and adjusting, because if you're doing something that's not working, and we've done that with Dryrun, where you're just like, that's not working, we got to shift, or it's working, but yeah, you know what? It's not working great. And you got to shift. And it's, man, you got to have a strong stomach to do it. And it takes time to do it, which makes it even harder.
Yeah.
But you just got to trust it. You got to be optimistic, like I said, but realistic. I think one of the things I remember reading a book, it may have even been in the E-Myth, I'm trying to remember now. But there was a quote I read so many years ago that still rings true with me, is that entrepreneurs, one of their best skills is limiting risk. And the thought is always, as an entrepreneur, you got to take risks, got to take risks, got to take risks. And we realize, like, yeah, you're doing that. It's incredibly stupid risk. So what your skill has to be is limiting risk, because you shouldn't be piling on. Like, it's already rough, right?
I mean, 1,000,000,000%. the crazy thing is like people will talk to me about my business and go like, wow, that was so risky that you did that. And like, wow. I'm like, well, you have no idea actually how much we barbelled and hedged that risk. And like, there wasn't just one thing. We had outs, like so yeah, that's a major responsibility to not just go like willy nilly and gamble. 'Cause anybody can gamble. I'm going to Vegas this Friday. I can't wait. I have a $500 budget, but in my mind, that money's gone, vaporized. If I win money, I will be so surprised. That's gambling. You cannot gamble with a company. If the odds of your success are 50% of a plan that you have, that's crazy. Just go to Vegas then. I mean, you have to have a plan where even if your primary thing doesn't work, you have backup and you have like, secondary and tertiary things.
Yeah.
You have outs so that the overall macro chance of success is like 80-90%. Yes. Managing risk is, and that's like what I love actually. I've always loved managing risk. So here's a quick little story about that is in sixth grade, back when I was growing up, in the sixth grade, like boys stay with boys, girls stay with girls, right? It's like very like, you don't really like, you're not friends with the opposite sex. And so they're like, all right, whoever wants to be class president, get nominated. And I learned all the people that were going for class president were girls. So I like did some math. And I was like, wait a second. If, right now the girls have to split all the votes, but if I run, I will get all the boy votes and then they will be left to fight over the girl votes. So I ran and won. And like, that was like risk mitigation. That was like a calculation of like, this should be the outcome if I do this. And then actually when I was a senior in high school, I ran for class president and won on a different strategy because the incumbent would only target and campaign to like honors and track one kids, like all like, and ignored, track 2 and 3. But track 2 and 3 outnumbered the top upper tier tracks. So I didn't even talk to the honor roll kids or track 1. I gave that to him. And I put my energy into track 2 and 3. To me, that's resource allocation. It's like, you don't need to win all. Give him the upper, the track 1 and honor roll kids. And then you go after track 2 and 3 and just hyper niche and focus in there. And I beat him. And so to me, those like two things were like that's the DNA of an entrepreneur, is like kind of looking at odds and trying to see around corners of like what are potential outcomes here. And then the other thing is come to terms with failure. So, I mean, I don't know what you do about this, but even when times are dark, I go, all right, I model the worst thing is like, all right, if this all fails, I will go get a job. Or, I don't know, like just like, go get a job. I mean, that's the worst thing that could happen. No one's going to die.
Yep. Yeah. Well, I can agree with you. And I remember hearing about the guy that was started GoDaddy. And I may have even shared this on the show before, but I remember reading an article about him. I can't remember. Bob Parsons, that's his name.
Yeah.
And he said, like, basically, like, it was during the dot bomb, I'm thinking the early 2000s one, and businesses around him were failing. He was down to his last $1 million, which sounds like a lot of money, but it wasn't when you got a burn and a team and everything. Mm-hmm. And his story was he was sitting in Starbucks and he just went, well, I guess if I run out of cash and fail, I can just be a barista. That's what what was in his head. And that was enough in his mindset to go back and gut it out. And he said, we just stuck around, just like we were talking. It's like, we just kind of hang around long enough and found a way when everyone else failed around us. And we're kind of one of the only ones left standing. And we had the entire market. And then boom, like it basically exploded that business. And it's just something it's hard to sometimes reconcile that. Like it's during dark times and tough times to be able to just stay optimistic, but realistic, and just keep yourself in the fight long enough.
So there's a Winston Churchill quote: success is not final. Failure is not fatal. It's the courage to continue that counts.
Nice.
That's it. Will you continue? That takes the most, and you have to be around in order. It's like every day you're in business is another day that potential opportunity can come across your desk. But when you're not in business, opportunity cannot come across your desk. It seems very like obvious, but that really is the equation. It's like stay in business. When you stay in business, good things can happen. Yeah.
And that mindset is just so much grit and just having that belief, an unnatural belief, and just sticking with it somehow, through the thick and thin. I think that was a great quote to sort of end this conversation on, because I know we're coming up close on the hour here. But I want everyone to know how they can find you. First of all, tell us about what you guys do, who you do it for, how they can find you, and the whole works.
So our name is Umault. We're a B2B video ad agency, so we only service B2B companies. And for those brands looking to grow their brand, and we typically work in like top of funnel kind of brand awareness campaigns. And we take like a very unique creative approach to where it's not your typical boring B2B explainer or talking head videos. We try to do stuff that's creative. So you can find us at umault.com, umault.com. And I don't know if this is okay, but we actually made a couple Dryrun spots. So we're excited about those.
I was just about to talk with them, and I'm just going to, and by the time this rolls out, they may be live, and we are super excited because, Guy and his team have made us 2 spots, and they're brilliant, and we're so excited about them. The team is so excited, and hopefully you're going to see them everywhere for a long time, because we're going to run the hell out of these things. They're so cool. So we're so excited by it.
Awesome.
Well, thanks guys so much. This has been a really fun conversation, and it's so funny. Like sometimes we get in these conversations, I literally forget we're recording. I just I get so into these conversations with entrepreneurs. I just love it. And always have a great conversation with you. So everybody out there, make sure you check out Guy at Umault, and he can help you do some amazing stuff to raise your brand, raise awareness, and also, if you guys are suffering, anyone out there suffering from lumpy cash flow, come and check us out at Dryrun. We're going to help you see it. We're going to help you fix it. That's what we do. Dryrun.com. So thanks everyone for joining us, and we'll see you next time.